welcome, greetings, salutations, and all that good stuff. Thank you so much for joining us because we are talking foreshadowing and improvisation. So if you ever wanted to up your GMing skills, if you've ever wanted your players to say, oh, holy crap, you really are an evil puppet master, then you are in the right place. We're chatting foreshadowing and improvisation. This is obviously a great way to take your game to the next level. And speaking of foreshadowing, I should introduce these beautiful beams on the screen. We have, of course, Guy, the Great GM. Say hello, Guy.
Hello, Guy.
Good job. Guy is the face of the hit YouTube channel, How to Be a Great GM. He is a screenwriter, he's an RPG writer, and he is a great GM. And of course, we have Seth Skorkowsky, writer extraordinaire, GM extraordinaire. Seth, how are you doing?
Doing wonderfully, thank you.
Boom! Thank you so much for joining us. And last but certainly not least, we have Lloyd Gyan, also known as DM Phenom. Lloyd, how are you?
I'm better now that I'm here. I'll tell you that now.
And we are so glad that you are. I should probably introduce myself. I am Janet from World Anvil, the 1 million strong world building platform and campaign manager. That is by day. By night, I am a fantasy author, an RPG writer, and secretly a YouTuber. No, it's true. My secret has been revealed. Guy, I have the first question for you. What is foreshadowing?
It's slightly more than 3 shadowing, but slightly less than 5 shadowing. I've only been storing that joke for a while now. That's probably why it fell. Anyway, so just out. Yes, get out. I'll just leave.
Polished. Fine.
So within the context of role playing, foreshadowing, in my opinion, is when you set something up. You give the players some information which doesn't seem to have any value. It doesn't have any relevance whatsoever, and they can make nothing out of it. But then in another adventure or a couple months later, suddenly you reveal what that links to, and then they go, "Ah, remember when we met that strange person who said this or who gave us that thing? We're going to use it now." So that's what foreshadowing is, which is basically a GM trying to predict what's going to happen in the future so that what you're telling them now will be useful in the future. So in that context, that's what I think foreshadowing is.
Fantastic. Lloyd, anything to add to that? Foreshadowing.
Yes, foreshadowing is not just also having things as the future. It is reflecting on actions that certain people have taken and bringing the consequences of the action to forefront at a later date. Like making a decision to go left or right in a road and find out later that if you're going left in a road, you've got a whole bunch of gold, or right the road had been bad, and you realizing which path you want to take and which one is better. Foreshadowing can also, in very strange contexts, be done by the players themselves when they realize that they're the ones that can bring it forward to make it happen.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to talk about character foreshadowing in just a minute. Seth, anything to add? Foreshadowing. What are your sort of prime directive? What's your prime rules for foreshadowing?
Well, foreshadowing is essentially the trick of making it look like the GM had any clue what the hell they were doing before they did it. That's ultimately what it is. Ultimately, it is a way to make stuff look like there was a longer story involved, that there something just doesn't seem like random. It's like there was foreshadowing leading up to this. It was obvious. You should have known this was going to happen. So, but yeah, it's basically to make it look like there's one long, cohesive, living story versus a bunch of crap you're making up because you're panicking behind a screen.
Very eloquently put. Absolutely. The next question I have on my list is, how can you foreshadow if you don't have a plan? Well, I think that we've already touched on that, and Lloyd certainly touched on that when he said, foreshadowing isn't just thinking about what's projected into the future, it's about linking things into what's gone on. So any tips on that, Seth? Foreshadowing when you really are flying by the seat of your pants.
Oh, well, let's just remember what you said, and then you try to do it. This is the J.J. Abrams rule of writing. Throw out a bunch of crazy stuff, and then later link back to it, and they'll think you're a genius. That really is how you do it. So just remember the stuff you say, and then be all like, ooh, I can use that later. And then if I can tie it to something else, like a third thing, I look like I am the smartest GM in the world, and your players will be blown away.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Guy, you have a special word for this. You call them seeds, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What Seth was saying, throw out a bunch of things. I like to throw out things that, as I'm speaking, as I'm saying, you find a dagger, I'll usually add on a little bit of something else to it. So it's not just a dagger, it's a dagger that has a strange symbol on it in a language that you can't read. So you give them a little bit of information, but it's vague, but it's intriguing in its own kind of way. It could also be you find an incredibly plain iron dagger on the body of the king, because in itself is an unusual situation. So I try and link it to something that is vaguely mysterious, and then literally park it. There is no plan with that dagger. There is absolutely no idea where that dagger is going to go or what it's been used for, but it's a seed, and you've now planted that seed. And so later on, when you need an assassin to kill some people, if they use an iron dagger, the party will go, oh, there was an iron dagger on the king. And you're like, yes, the seed has now grown into a small shrubbery, because we were talking Python earlier on in the chat. And then you start going, okay, they are interested in it, because that's the other thing, is you might start trying foreshadowing stuff, but the players just don't care who slept with the barmaid on a Tuesday and a full moon.
I do.
Well, okay, you do, but the rest of the party are like, no, that's completely boring. It has nothing to do with this. We're going over there. So sometimes those trees will die. You put the seed down, it starts to grow, and then it dies. So yes, but at least by consciously putting that into your process, you then start to be more active in doing it. So it's not so much of a random instance. It then becomes part of your process. I think, anyway. That's how it works.
Absolutely. So we know what foreshadowing is, right? It's sowing seeds that you can use in the future. My next question is, how do you make those seeds memorable enough that your players are going to cotton onto them? Lloyd, what are your thoughts?
Hi, I'm Lloyd. I do love improv GMing. Long story. Okay, so foreshadowing is fantastic and great and awesome and lovely, but it's completely pointless if the players don't think they figured it out before you gave it to them. That's the biggest point of foreshadowing. So if your player says a statement and goes, I think I've figured this out. I've got this clue and that clue, and this makes sense. And you're like, that is not what I was thinking back then. Just take up your pen and just make a few notes, see if you can work it in, see if you can cheat around the corner. Who do you need to kill to make that possible? Done. Put it in the game, make it work, because foreshadowing is amazing when they're like, I had no idea, I should have seen it coming. But it's even better when they're like, I figured it out. I know what's going on. I know what to do. That's when the strength comes for foreshadowing being used in improvisation moments. When they think they've beaten you and beating the plot, and they're going to try and cut ahead of the pass. And that's when the action happens, and that's when you should go for it and kick some butt.
Absolutely. If the players think it is the knights who say knee, well, gosh darn it, it's the knights who say knee with chainsaws, because you should always do one more thing that they don't expect. Do you know where I learned that? I learned that from Guy.
Nice.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And going with your players' expectations, as Lloyd just said, is a really, really great way not only to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I can make you look clever. It's also a great way to keep their expectations running the game, and those expectations are going to help them enjoy the game as well, which is actually kind of what we're all there for at the end of the day anyway, right? Like, we're there to have fun, or why do we bother? So we know what foreshadowing is, and we've talked about how to make things memorable. When is foreshadowing bad? What are the risks of foreshadowing? Seth, what do you think?
I think the risk of foreshadowing is when you basically spoil the game yourself. Like you throw in too much. That's because I was actually going to mention a thing that you mentioned that you stole from Guy, of like, always add something else. So if you spoil yourself to the point that when you do have your big scene or your big reveal, if there is absolutely nothing new to what you've already foreshadowed, that stinks. So don't give away everything. yet. So that's mine.
So always add a twist is what you're saying, or keep something back.
Yes.
Nice, very nice. Can you give me some?
And I think Lloyd's going to explode.
No, I just have one thing to add, just one tiny little bit. Let them win. Sometimes, you know what? You don't need to have the 5th underlying layer. I mean, I usually have like 12 layers going at one time because I'm insane. But you don't really need. Sometimes your players just, just figure it out and then just go beat up the bad guy. Like, it's all good to throw a whole bunch of stuff at them, but if they figure out one out, be like, you know what? Let's just chuck the rest in the bin and let's just give them a win this one time. Just this one, maybe like the next few times you have like more things happening. But every now and then, a player wants to feel like they succeeded and they got it all and they have nothing else to go. That's all I want to add. Please carry on.
Can I add one thing?
Please.
So yes, and yes, and yes. I love all of that. What Seth was going on, I thought he was going one direction, he went in another, which is great. That's great jamming. So I'm going to go in the other direction to actually also bring in Lloyd's analogy of the forked road.
Hi.
So we're going down the other way now. Don't throw out so many seeds that your players are going, I have 180 side quests and I don't know which one to follow first, because we've still got to do this, we've 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 got to do that, we've got to do the next thing. And we don't have enough time to do all in because the sacrifice is happening at the full moon. So I do also tend to do that because anyone that my players talk to will have seeds for adventure until eventually the players just get overwhelmed. So also pull it back. All right, sorry, Janet. Go.
I think actually you've raised something very interesting there, which is what is the difference between foreshadowing and giving a hook for a side quest? Because they can be the same thing and they can be different things. So how do you manage that? What do you think, Lloyd?
I was gonna let someone else go first because I went first last time. I forgot.
Oh, go for it.
No, okay. Well, the big difference between foreshadowing and basically side questing is that side questing is always put in front. It is the GM throwing the side quest to the players for them to take action, whereas people acting on their own on hunches and tricks is more them looking at the foreshadowing and trying to lead on with that. So if an NPC comes up to you and goes, kill 10 rats, that is a side quest. If an NPC comes up to you and goes, yeah, sure, here's a dagger, that iron dagger I found on the floor, and you're like, that was what killed the king, that's you working on the foreshadowing. They don't always have to be separate. You can make the two things links together, but it's knowing when one is over succeeding the other and knowing how to separate them at the right time is where you get the difference between them.
Anything to add, folks?
I think you nailed it. A side quest has a call to action, and a foreshadowing doesn't necessarily have a call to action involved with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wish I could say it half as excited as Lloyd is, man. I'm like in awe. It's amazing.
I feel like Lloyd is 15 Red Bulls in.
Listen, I was told I was on a panel with Guy Sclanders and Seth Skorkowsky. I had to come ready, okay? I had to come prepared. I've been at this for a week. You do not even know. I love it.
Oh my gosh. Well, just before we move on to a few questions we have coming in already. Gosh, look at that. We've talked about when you can foreshadow, and obviously sometimes in writing you have to foreshadow. Sometimes it's a thing where like you cannot end the book if you have not let your readers know that this is a thing. It's Chekhov's gun or Chekhov's wombat or Chekhov's banana, whatever the thing is, you have to let them know about it. So where in GMing do you have to foreshadow? Seth, what do you think?
If you are going to have a twist or a reveal or some big aha, there has to be something that they can look back on and say, I should have seen this, or I suspected, or something, versus it just feels completely random. Because if you do a big twist or something and it feels completely out of nowhere, everyone is going to be disappointed. Sometimes they get mad. But if you can lay down the foreshadowing, even if they miss it, and when the thing happens, if they can look back and go, oh my God, it was the Kaiser Sose moment. If it was there the whole time, that's beautiful. But because if you don't do that, it's just like, who cares? So they're not as interested. So the foreshadowing makes it so much sweeter when you get to have a reveal. Man, I can see Lloyd just getting ready.
No,
I don't want to know what he's
chilled.
gonna
I didn't need to be here. I'm just chilled. I'm just like, yes, absolutely. Yes. Continue. Yes, please.
I would say that it's absolutely necessary if you are trying to pull a fast one on the players as well. So if you've set them up that the magical item that they have will help them slay Nazi Adolf Hitler. I don't know if he could be anything other than Nazi, but it's like, okay, fine.
There, guy.
Nazi Wombat Hitler.
Nazi Wombat Hitler. Okay, sure. So you're going to slay him. If you've given the players this item, an NPC has said, take this holy gun and it will shoot the wombat and kill him because it works against Nazis. And they get to that point and then they pull the trigger on the wombat and all that happens is a little flower comes out at the end of the gun and the whole thing was a mysterious trap. The players are going to feel very betrayed that what they were told has now worked against them. And there's been no opportunity for them to figure out that the gun won't work. So you have to put in these little clues, not hard clues, but little clues. And when you are doing the villain is working with the players until he can then betray them story, which is a great story, again, you have to give at least some little clues, some foreshadowing that they are evil. You open the room and, they have a body in the chest freezer. And they're like, it's a Halloween prop. It could be, and they probably will accept that. But when they look back, they'll go, oh, it was a real body. Hey, I think he's the killer. So yes, I think that's when you have to have foreshadowing.
That got really Scooby-Doo all of a sudden. I love it. So how do you know your players are picking up what you're putting down? Do you have any techniques for that, Lloyd? What do you reckon?
Yes. So a big part of being a GM, more than knowing yourself, knowing the rules, knowing the game, blah, 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 having a slot, is knowing your players. Even in an improvised game, it is all about understand. You have to get that same mental level where you can understand your players in order to integrate the way they play and understand what they would pick up on. If you have a player who's like, I'm really into combat, and it's like, that's the one time I shine, you put all your foreshadowing in the combat section. If your player was like, I love political intrigue, you put the foreshadowing there. So when you have a player who's like, you want a player to know, and you wanted to pick it up, you find a part that they care about, you put the foreshadowing on that section, and you will see in their eyes that they've grabbed it. A GM I once played with, whom I love, Danny, whom I love to bits, always told me that sometimes you should have the villain just look at a player and be like, this is your one and only chance to stop me. Are you going to do it? And you have succeeded in picking the right slot when the player says no and regrets it later on when they had the chance to do it, they didn't do it. That's how you get your strength into that. Yeah.
Anything to add, Seth?
No.
Okay, let's the moderator
I
here.
could just watch Lloyd answer questions all day, man. I haven't had that much energy in years.
That's a compliment.
Okay. Sorry, anything to add, Guy?
Well, no, because what Lloyd said was absolutely bang on. Hit your players where they hurt the most, and then that will get them to follow or sink or swallow anything that you give them. I think that's very important. I think it should just be the Lloyd show.
I think there are other tricks that you can use as well. You can use things like a music change at the point that you introduce something new. You can use things like introducing a new character with this new thing. Anything that draws attention, anything that makes your players go, something new, or like a little bit of extra space, or somebody doing something that you don't expect them to. If they're an NPC that's been foreshadowed a little bit already, that has been introduced a little bit already. Trying to draw their attention to this thing. You can even do things like weather effects or light effects or something around the thing. Obviously, this is all verbal stuff, right? Like you notice the firelight glimmers on it just for a second. That's one more sentence than you would usually say about an item you're going to see them picking it up. You're going to see them going, hi, he's spending a lot of time talking about this item. Interesting. Maybe I should poke it. And that is a good way to get your players interested in stuff. If you spend just a little bit more time, or you use a flowery word around it, they're going to be like, huh, interesting. Maybe I should investigate the thing. And you're going to have them following the foreshadowing. You're going to have them interacting, and probably they'll remember it, or they're at least more likely to remember it. Yeah, so that's my little piece there. Give it an extra sentence, and maybe they'll pay attention. Lim, 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 lim. Here we go. I have a question. Does foreshadowing have to be in character, or can you incorporate player, that is to say meta knowledge? So if you're playing aliens and you know the players, know the movies, can you foreshadow that there are going to be aliens or something like common but not so obvious? Question. Lloyd, what do you think?
Oh, okay. I guess I wasn't sure I was gonna go for it, but yes, you can. So if you're playing a role-playing game, there's certain tropes that players will automatically pick up. Like, you've got the entire history of D&D. Okay, let's just throw that aside. Let's just grab a movie. So let's grab the usual suspects, you know, the big, oh my God, what the heck is going foreshadowing movie. If you have a scene where a character is sitting down and you describe a whole bunch of things on your back with like behind you, like with pictures and stuff like that, and the character starts saying random names, I guarantee you our player's gonna be like, are the names written on that paper behind me right now? Is that it? Is that what he's doing? And they'll turn around and see it. Using tropes from movies, from games, from anime, whatever you want, putting that stuff into games, players will pick it up out of character and they'll be like, I know what this trope is. I know it. For example, the most famous line, a guy comes up to your bar and goes, I don't like you. My friend doesn't like you. And you're like, well, I guess we're getting the gloves out. Let's go. Okay, let's have a fight. Let's do this. Like, it's just one of those things you love. You go into that. It's one of the things that makes it so great. That's my sentence.
You know what? I death reaction videos of Lloyd. That's what I want to wake me up every morning. Watching Lloyd explain foreshadowing. I think we all need that, don't we, chat? What do you think? You let me know. Guy, anything to add to that?
Boring stuff. Because look, so meta knowledge is always going to be tricky, and I think it depends on the system that you're playing. So if you're playing let's say you're playing Star Trek, if the characters or if the players suddenly encounter, and this depends on what time period it's in, but let's say they suddenly encounter a Romulan. Metagame says that there's a whole lot of stuff going on there that's probably nefarious, or that there's some shady thing happening, but we also know from the shows that Romulan might be a genuinely good person and is not intrinsically evil. But then we suspect that there is an intrinsically evil plot going on behind that particular Romulan who doesn't know it yet. And so the metagame is definitely strong. And yes, we can use it. I think sometimes to subvert that gives you a stronger story, provided that you can do it in an intelligent way, and a way that kind of makes sense. And that's, again, where the foreshadowing then comes in, where the very first time you see the Romulan is giving food to someone, and they think they're doing a genuinely good act. I mean, that's a very on the nose kind of example, but yes, using metagame tropes and all that kind of stuff, it's shorthand, and it gets the players into the space a lot faster, and it gives them that insight which you need sometimes. Just make sure that they get those references, though, because some of us are a little bit older than others, and so, you know, when you reference films from before the turn of the century, you realize just how old you are. Yes, so, and that goes back to reading your audience, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in there and say this is something that I've struggled with in the past as both a player and a GM, is that my references are not the same as everybody else's references sometimes. So you know who's at your table and know what they know. And if it's really important, maybe recommend they go do some homework and watch a movie. There is something to be said for the way that you treat tropes, and the way that you treat tropes becoming a trope within your game. So if you always subvert your tropes, that's what your players will expect. So when you play a trope straight, they won't expect that, right? So it's all about building up we're getting into the inner circles of meta here. But essentially, like, if you always play to the tropes, then your players will expect you to play to the tropes. So that's always something to bear in mind. I think it's time to jump onto improvisation, because I have a ton of questions about that from you guys already, which we'll be answering in just a minute. But of course, what is improvisation and why do we need it? Guy, go.
We need improvisation because it's important.
Right, you're fired. Seth, on you go.
Improvisation is the glue that holds the whole damn thing together. You can write as much as you want before that game starts, and the moment the game begins, it is pure freaking improv and trying to scramble to keep the original plan in some semblance of order. Improv, it's the glue, man. It's the duct tape.
It's the glue and the duct tape. Guy loves me. Lloyd, what do you think?
Improvisation is when you know. Improvisation is useful and very good in the world, but when you can make improvisation look like careful planning is when you go from being a good GM to a great GM.
That is absolutely the case. So let's jump straight on that. How do you do that? Actually, no, scratch that. Where do you start? Let's go from there. We're going to go from the building blocks up. But we're not going to talk about when you get really good at it. We're going to talk about right at the beginning. Where do you start if you're feeling a little bit unconfident with impro?
I say you start with practicing it. And the way I do that is I use a technique that I call free-form association. And so you do that every day. I realize now this technique doesn't work so well when you're in lockdown, but when you're not in lockdown, which will be sometime in the near future, hopefully. So free-form association is you just, and you can actually do it from your window, actually, when you're sort of standing there looking at, the outside world. If you find a human wandering around, just look at them and make up their backstory. Figure it out. Look at the shoes they're wearing. Look at the pants they're wearing. Look at the thing that they're carrying on their back, and work out what their life story was, who they are, but also work out where they're going and why they're going there. And just do that every single time you're bored. The next time you're in a queue or you're getting a cell phone call from an unknown number during a live go away, that was supposed to be on silent. But anyway, it's 10:30 in the evening. Who the hell calls it 10:30 in the evening? Probably an emergency call. Someone's burning down, but that's okay. There's other people they can phone. What would I do anyway? So yes, just look at people.
Sherlock Holmes them.
Yeah, exactly. Sherlock Holmes them. Exactly right. I mean, that literally came from Sherlock Holmes. And all you're doing is just practicing making links about random stuff, so that when you then get to the NPC, if you're using the tricks that these guys have used and the previous panels used, where you're thinking of an actor or a character from a film, all you then have to do is picture them in your mind's eye. And then you're starting to talk their dialogue. You're starting to improvise because you're linking what they're doing with what they're saying, with what they want to do, and so that's it. So I say you start with practicing.
Start with practicing Sherlock Holmes from random strangers and make up some weird stuff about them. There we go. You have it from the Great GM. Any additional advice for where to start and how to practice? Lloyd, what do you think?
Steal.
Nice.
Let's just call it what it is, people. Okay, you're kind of caught. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to get this up. You want to know what to do. Steal. Every time you watch a movie, if you find something you really enjoy, just keep that in the back of your mind for a while. You find a plot and you like, keep that in the back of your mind. Just jack it. If someone asks you a question in the game and you don't know what you're saying, think back to a movie you saw before, steal a dialogue from there and just keep flowing. Denzel Washington says that he's coming for you in their Shawshank Redemption. It doesn't matter how good or well it is. When you start stealing, you get better at it. Oh, this is not a good advice for a podcast. I do apologize. When you start stealing, you get better at it The more you jack, the more you're going to use, and the better you're going to be for taking it out and using it in the scene. Almost everything to do with improvisation comes from somewhere else or something else you have heard or seen. Not everything is original, so don't worry about it. Just steal cool things and use it.
Okay, so what I have now is the Sherlock Holmes advice and the rogue advice. Excellent. Seth, anything to add to round out our party?
Sort of, I guess. My thought is, before a game starts, you need to prepare everything that is essential. And after that, don't waste space coming up with the stuff that's not essential. And you just know that I will have to improvise this part that isn't critical. That way your notes are like one page, and you don't have the case where you've got like 97 pages and you have to flip through it because it has to be exactly what you envisioned beforehand. So once you start getting used to, I'm only going to prepare what is absolutely critical, and then I am going to just pull the rest of it out of my butt or steal it when it becomes the right moment, you get a lot better at that. And eventually your notes start becoming shorter and shorter because you realize that you're better at being able to just kind of run with it on the fly and go. So
I'm going to call that the cleric's advice. So you pray for your spells, but if in doubt, you hit somebody with a big hammer. I like it.
Damn right.
It works. There we go. I would always say, plan the big stuff, don't sweat the small stuff. So pretty much like Seth, like make sure that your main points, the stuff that needs to happen is going to happen. And for everything else, well, if he's called Barbarina rather than George, well, fine, he's called Barbarina now. That actually brings me to the next question, which is, how do you remember what you have improvised? I believe that Seth was saying that he's terrible at remembering some of the stuff that he comes up with, so I'm not going to ask him first. Lloyd, how do you remember what you've improvised?
I don't remember. Because if I don't remember and the players don't remember, it never happened. No one's going to remember, so it's fine. What I do at the end of a game is I do a next time on session, and I write down all the things I think are important and what I'd like to happen next time. And I'll take a look at the notes. And if I miss something in my notes and the players don't pick up on it, I'm just going to quietly just pretend I didn't hear it. Like, what NPC? What do we need to talk about? If someone brings it up, they will remind me and I'll be able to put it in. But I practice that. That's like one of the things I do for stealing. I go, I know what I've put in for now. And it's something else I said earlier. If I forget and I make a mistake, I'll just own up to it or I'll integrate it into it. Sometimes just to be like, look, I completely forgot I brought an NPC up. I made a mistake. It wasn't in my notes, but we'll make it work. Or sometimes you're like, yes, why isn't the janitor in the room, everyone? Did you look in the closet that leads to the alternate dimension that I mentioned 2 sessions ago?
So essentially, either it doesn't happen or you hang a lantern on it and you say, look, this is a feature, not a bug. It's a feature. Yes. Any additional thoughts, Guy?
No, that was pretty simple. Either you pretend it was a plan all along and then you figure it out afterwards how it is actually going to happen. I was just laughing because that's exactly what happened in my Sunday game. I was using a VTT and I brought the character tokens across, the player tokens and the monster tokens, and completely forgot about the NPCs that were traveling with them. And they went, where is so-and-so and so-and-so? I'm like, yes, where is so-and-so and so-and-so? I still haven't figured out how or where the hell they've gone. But I've got until Sunday.
Those foreshadowing moments I've heard so much about.
Yeah. Sometimes you can't foreshadow stupid.
You better put that on a shirt.
That's all our quote bot on World Anvil is going to say from now. That's all it's going to say. It's just, sometimes you can't foreshadow stupid. There we go.
But Lloyd will steal that, so you need to put that on a shirt first.
I already booked it up. It's on my Etsy now. Thank you much.
Damn it!
Too slow, guys. Sorry, I gotta make that big. Okay.
Holden, yeah, that's a username. Has a question. I'm writing my first campaign to take place within the next few weeks, and I'm really worried about my skill at improv. What tips and tricks do you keep in your back pocket for those times when you get sweaty?
Sex.
There we go.
Yeah, I guess. Okay,
When
fine.
you get sweaty, that's what happens.
That's pretty much the only answer.
But it's an honest answer. It's an actual honest answer. Can I explain before everyone sort of labels me as this weird? Well, it's too late for that.
It's
already.
too late. It's too late.
Already got that on a shirt too, brother.
Yeah.
And in my client's defense, Your Honor.
Yes.
One guy talk to us.
For me, I know it sounds weird, but that's a default. If I don't know what the NPC is going to say, I put myself in their shoes to a degree, and I say, okay, one of the things that humans think about quite a lot is the loved one, not necessarily the act of sex, but it's the loved one. It's the, what am I going to be doing next that I really want to be doing, rather than whatever it is I'm doing now, or whom am I going to be doing, et cetera, depending on the situation. But that allows you to then go, okay, cool. Well, they're talking to the blacksmith and they're asking the blacksmith about his family and about the goblins on the mountain. If the blacksmith is going, I really just want to get home to my wife because she's made me a nice cup of tea and, you know, I've got a good book I'm ready to read. Then when you're improvising, you're like, well, here's a person who wants to just go home and he doesn't want to talk to these strange people about goblins on a mountain. He doesn't know anything about the goblins on the mountain. Or go and bother Sally. She knows all about the goblins on the mountain. You know, so you've improv dialogue, you've created relationships with another NPC, with this blacksmith, and he's now going to leave the blacksmith shop, so you don't run the risk of the PCs then going into shopping mode for the next 10 hours of the game. And whilst they're walking to Sally, you can then figure out that Sally is actually the one who's making the tea all along. But yes, so I always try and link it back to the primary motivator of that NPC, and that helps you with improvisation. Because if you figure out what they want, then you go, well, what are they getting now? Is that what they want? Is it not what they want? That'll put them in a mood, as far as I'm concerned. So.
Amazing. I have one final question from the audience, but first I think it's time to raffle off the second of these, the PDF of the Star Trek Adventures. Oh yeah. And by the way, if you want to see Star Trek Adventures live played, you can do that right after this. Guy, Seth, and me are going to be live on a Miranda-class starship doing things in space. It's going to be awesome. You should come check us out. But I have a question for you, glorious chat beans. And it is this answer for a chance to win the PDF. Who is the spiritual leader of the Klingons? Let me know in the chat. It's not Klingon opera, but it should be, in case anyone was wondering. Klingon opera.
A tricky one.
It's tricky, but awesome. Oh, they're too fast, Guy. They know their Trek. We've got some Trekkins in here. So I think Tony Karlstrom was the first with Kalis. Yes, absolutely. He is very much the man of truth as far as the Klingons are concerned. So congratulations, Tony Karlstrom. You will be spoken to by a moderator. Good luck. The final question that we have here is, what specifically do you prepare when you are doing a session to make improv easier? So Seth mentioned he has a paper with the basic points on. What specifically would those points be? Like, break it down.
Okay, well, that is entirely dependent on what the hell the adventure is, between different themes or different anything. So when it comes to, well, I kind of whatever the plot is, I will usually have a couple quick notes about it, just as reminders to myself of, like, you know, when they go there, make sure they hear this rumor, because otherwise we'll go to the place and then they'll leave it, and then I'll be all like, oh crap, I forgot to give them the freaking plot, or the important foreshadowing. So basically the die-hard framework of what you need for NPCs. Guy loves to just associate them all with sex because that's his thing, and that's cool. I don't judge, man. I like to assign them an adjective, whether it be angry or hungry or suspicious or greedy, and like that's like literally all I need for that character. And if I can, I will come up with a character from a movie and then I will associate that with them. Like, this guy will be Patrick Warburton and he'll talk like this, and everybody will remember that. And now it's the shady cloak salesman who talks like Patrick Warburton, and we just run. But all I had was shady cloak salesman, maybe Warburton, and like that is the entirety of what I had.
Awesome. Lloyd, how do you do this? What do you prepare specifically when you're getting ready for a session?
A name list. Appropriate name list.
Boom, right? There we go.
Like, no amount of improvisation is going to make me remember decent names that are appropriate to the game that we're playing. So I have an appropriate name list written with a gap that I can, 1, tick the name when I use it, and 2, write down either a sentence or 3 adjectives about who they were. And I'm like, tick, talk to him later. Might be bad guy, ? Yeah. Or something like that. Write it down in a nice little list and you're done. You can never go wrong with a name list. A name list will solve all your... Sometimes you're playing a superhero game, write a superpower list. Sometimes you're playing like a multicultural, like, variety world, write a race, like a list of the races on the side. But name lists will always be important. Appropriate name lists, tick it, multiple styles of names, tick it when you're going along the line, you're done.
Boom, there we go. Guy, anything to add to that? I see you nodding vigorously.
Yeah, I've literally just released a video saying come up with at least 40 names before you start your session, because you will use them. And if you don't use them, you carry them over to the next week. Names, I think names are the biggest stumbling block that people struggle with, regardless of how you do it, or what techniques you have. Because I've got a few tricks on how to come up with names, but if you just look at the list and you go, right, their name is Brian, there we go, sorted, because that was on the list. Or Jerry, and then you look at the next name, and it's still Jerry. Like, maybe I need to work on my lists.
I mean, there are like a billion name generators online that you can try for any
yes.
genre nowadays. Just like
that's true.
Paste, print, done.
I love the idea of this like geriatric town with all the Jerrys. It's amazing. Yeah, no, I mean, and that's always what we say as well. My husband and I, when we're giving GM advice, we say 10 names, 3 quick hooks that you can throw out, and a not so random encounter that links back to something that is current affairs in your world. So pick a current affairs thing, whatever it is, and here's a random encounter. But it's not random because it's linked into the world, so that makes your world feel big and it makes it look like you planned it, and kind of you did. And then you just tick off what you used and add the new ones for the next session. It's literally that easy. You can just keep it at the front of however you organize your notes. We, sweet beans, are out of time. Can you imagine that? Well, we did only have 45 minutes to talk about 2 of the biggest subjects in GMing, and I think you did an amazing job. So thank you so much for joining us. And folks in the chat, thank you as well. Guy, who are you and where can we find you?
I run a YouTube channel called How to Be a Great GM, and you can find us at www.greatgamemaster.com. And that links us to all of the social media stuff.
Boom.
So that's where I'm from.
There you go. Seth, who are you and how can we find you?
You can find me at YouTube under the exciting channel name Seth Skorkowsky. It is spelled exactly like my name should be there, because you're not going to remember that on its own. You can find me at Twitter at S Skorkowsky, also difficult to spell. And
it's Jerry, isn't it? Because it's easy to spell. Now we know.
I have had somebody ask me if, because I'm a novelist, I write novels, like, is that your real name or is that your novel name? I was like, who the hell would have come up with that? It's like, I want my author name to be unpronounceable and impossible to remember how to spell. No, you call yourself like Jerry Green and then everybody remembers it. So, but yeah, you can find me at Seth Skorkowsky on YouTube.
Seth Skorkowsky, definitely not Jerry. Lloyd, who are you and how can we find you?
I'm just Lloyd. I'm not really anyone special. I'm just a dude. I'm on Twitter as Drugged Dwarf, and I exist.
Drugged Dwarf, because I am going to follow you if your Twitter is half as exciting as you are.
I think I'm already following you, Seth. So call it a hunch.
Well, okay. Well, you know.
So you heard of it, Lloyd exists. I have been Janet from World Anvil. If you're curious about world building or campaign management, you can hop on down. We have a ton of Modiphius systems in our campaign manager. So if you're playing Modiphius games, you can do that on World Anvil. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back very shortly as Guy hosts a very special Star Trek game where we will be breaking down the play-by-play whilst playing in a game. Yes, it says it here on my script. It must be true. Suffice to say, if you ever wanted to peer into the mind of a professional GM and his professional streaming players, then this is the one for you. So stay with us for that, and we will catch you in a moment. Bye-bye.